Hi, my sweet friends. Welcome to Crochet Every Day with Judy. I'm Judy, and I do readings, book readings. So today we are reading from Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott. We are starting with Chapter 5, Ben Gets a Place. When Ben awoke next morning, he looked about him for a moment half bewildered, because there was neither a canvas tent, a barn roof, nor the blue sky above him, but a neat white ceiling where several flies buzzed sociably together, while from without came not the tramping of horses, the twitter of swallows, or the chirp of early birds, but the comfortable cackle of hens and the sound of two little voices chanting the multiplication table. Sancho sat at the open window watching the old cat wash her face, and trying to imitate her with his great ruffled paw, so awkwardly that Ben laughed, and Sanch, to hide his confusion at being caught, made one bound from chair to bed and licked his master's face so energetically that the boy dived under the bedclothes to escape from the rough tongue. A rap on the floor from below made both jump up, and in 10 minutes a shiny-faced lad and a lively dog went racing downstairs, one to say, "Good morning, ma'am," the other to wag his tail faster than ever tail wagged before, for ham frizzled on the stove, and Sancho was fond of it. "Did you rest well?" asked Mrs. Moss, nodding at him, fork in hand. "Guess I did. Never saw such a bed. I'm used to hay and a horse blanket, and lately nothing but sky for a cover and grass for my feather bed," laughed Ben, grateful for present comforts and making light of past hardships. "Clean, sweet corn husks ain't bad for young bones, even if they haven't got more flesh on them than yours have," answered Mrs. Moss, giving the smooth head a motherly stroke as she went by. "Fat ain't allowed in our profession, ma'am. The thinner the better for tight ropes and tumbling, likewise bareback riding and spry juggling. Muscle's the thing, and there you are." Ben stretched out a wiry little arm with a clenched fist at the end of it, as if he were a young Hercules, ready to play ball with the stove if she gave him leave. Glad to see him in such good spirits, she pointed to the well outside, saying pleasantly, "Well then, just try your muscle by bringing in some fresh water." Ben caught up a pail and ran off, ready to be useful. But while he waited for the bucket to fill down among the mossy stones, he looked about him, well pleased with all he saw. The small brown house with a pretty curl of smoke rising from its chimney, the little sisters sitting in the sunshine, green hills and newly planted fields far and near, a brook dancing through the orchard, birds singing in the elm avenue, and all the world as fresh and lovely as early summer could make it. "Don't you think it's pretty nice here?" asked Bab, as his eye came back to them after a long look, which seemed to take in everything, brightening as it roved. "Just the nicest place that ever was. Only needs a horse round somewhere to be complete," answered Ben, as the long well sweep came up with a dripping bucket at one end and old grindstone at the other. "The judge has 3, but he's so fussy about them, he won't even let us pull a few hairs out of old Major's tail to make rings of," said Betty, shutting her arithmetic with an injured expression. "Mike lets me ride the white one to water when the judge isn't round. It's such fun to go jouncing down the lane and back. I do love horses," cried Bab, bobbing up and down on the blue bench to imitate the motion of White Jenny. "I guess you are a plucky sort of a girl," and Ben gave her an approving look as he went by, taking care to slop a little water on Mrs. Puss, who stood curling her whiskers and humping up her back at Sancho. "Come to breakfast," called Mrs. Moss, and for about 20 minutes little was said as mush and milk vanished in a way that would have astonished even Jack the Giant Killer with his leather bag. "Now, girls, fly round and get your chores done up. Ben, you go chop me some kindlings, and I'll make things tidy. Then we can all start off at once," said Mrs. Moss, as the last mouthful vanished and Sancho licked his lips over the savory scraps that fell to his share. Ben fell to chopping so vigorously that chips flew wildly all about the shed. Bab rattled the cups into her dishpan with dangerous haste, and Betty raised a cloud of dust sweeping up, while Mother seemed to be everywhere at once. Even Sanch, feeling that his fate was at stake, endeavored to help in his own somewhat erratic way, now frisking about Ben at the risk of getting his tail chopped off, then trotting away to poke his inquisitive nose into every closet and room whither he followed Mrs. Moss in her flying round evolutions. Next, dragging off the mat so Betty could brush the doorsteps, or inspecting Bab's dishwashing by standing on his hind legs to survey the table with a critical air. When they drove him out, he was not the least offended, but gaily barked Puss up a tree, chased all the hens over the fence, and carefully interred an old shoe in the garden where the remains of the mutton bone were already buried. By the time the others were ready, he had worked off his superfluous spirits and trotted behind the party like a well-behaved dog accustomed to go out walking with ladies. At the crossroads they separated, the little girls running on to school, while Mrs. Moss and Ben swept up to the squire's big house on the hill. "Don't you be scared, child. I'll make it all right about your running away, and if the squire gives you a job, just thank him for it, and do your best to be steady and industrious. Then you'll get on, I haven't a doubt," she whispered, ringing the bell at a side door on which the word Morris shone in bright letters. "Come in," called a gruff voice, and feeling very much as if he were going to have a tooth out, Ben meekly followed the good woman, who put on her pleasantest smile, anxious to make the best possible impression. A white-headed old gentleman sat reading a paper and peered over his glasses at the newcomers with a pair of sharp eyes, saying in a testy tone, which would have rather daunted anyone who did not know what a kind heart he had under his capacious waistcoat, "Good morning, ma'am. What's the matter now? Young tramp been stealing your chickens?" "Oh, dear, no, sir," exclaimed Mrs. Moss, as if shocked at the idea. Then, in a few words, she told Ben's story, unconsciously making his wrongs and destitution so pathetic by her looks and tones that the squire could not help being interested, and even Ben pitied himself as if he were somebody else. "Now then, boy, what can you do?" asked the old gentleman, with an approving nod to Mrs. Moss as she finished, and such a keen glance from under his bushy brows that Ben felt as if he was perfectly transparent. "Most anything, sir, to get my living." "Can you weed?" "Never did, but I can learn, sir." "Pull up all the beets and leave the pigweed, eh? Can you pick strawberries?" "Never tried anything but eating 'em, sir." "Not likely to forget that part of the job. Can you ride a horse to plow?" "Guess I could, sir," and Ben's eyes began to sparkle, for he dearly loved the noble animals who had always been his dearest friends lately. "No antics allowed. My horse is a fine fellow, and I'm very particular about him." The squire spoke soberly, but there was a twinkle in his eye, and Mrs. Moss tried not to smile, for the squire's horse was a joke all over the town, being about 20 years old and having a peculiar gait of his own, lifting his 4 feet very high with a great show of speed, though never going out of a jog trot. The boys used to say he galloped before and walked behind and made all sorts of fun at the big Roman-nosed beast, who allowed no liberties to be taken with him. "I'm too fond of horses to hurt 'em, sir. As for riding, I ain't afraid of anything on 4 legs. The King of Morocco used to kick and bite like fun, but I could manage him first rate." "Then you'd be able to drive cows to pasture, perhaps?" "I've drove elephants and camels, ostriches and grizzly bears and mules, and 6 yellow ponies all to once. Maybe I could manage cows if I tried hard," answered Ben, endeavoring to be meek and respectful, when scorn filled his soul at the idea of not being able to drive a cow. The squire liked him all the better for the droll mixture of indignation and amusement betrayed by the fire in his eyes and the sly smile round his lips, and being rather tickled by Ben's list of animals, he answered gravely, "We don't raise elephants and camels much round here. Bears used to be plenty, but folks got tired of them. Mules are numerous, but we have the 2-legged kind, and as a general thing prefer Shanghai fowls to ostriches." He got no farther, for Ben laughed out so infectiously that both the others joined him, and somehow that jolly laugh seemed to settle matters better than words. As they stopped, the squire tapped on the window behind him, saying with an attempt at the former gruffness, "We'll try you on cows a while. My man will show you where to drive them and give you some odd jobs through the day. I'll see what you are good for and send you word tonight, Mrs. Moss. The boy can sleep at your house, can't he?" "Yes, indeed, sir. He can go on doing it and come up to his work just as well as not. I can see to him then, and he won't be a care to anyone," said Mrs. Moss heartily. "I'll make inquiries concerning your father, boy. Meantime, mind what you are about, and have a good report to give when he comes for you," returned the squire with a warning wag of a stern forefinger. "Thank you, sir. I will, sir. Father'll come just as soon as he can, if he isn't sick or lost," murmured Ben, inwardly thanking his stars that he had not done anything to make him quake before that awful finger, and resolving that he never would. Here a red-headed Irishman came to the door and stood eyeing the boy with small favor while the squire gave his orders. "Pat, this lad wants work. He's to take the cows and go for them. Give him any light jobs you have, and let me know if he's good for anything." "Yes, your honor. Come out of this, boy, till I show you the bastes," responded Pat, and with a hasty goodbye to Mrs. Moss, Ben followed his new leader, sorely tempted to play some naughty trick upon him in return for his ungracious reception. But in a moment he forgot that Pat existed, for in the yard stood the Duke of Wellington, so named in honor of his Roman nose. If Ben had known anything about Shakespeare, he would have cried, a horse, my kingdom for a horse," for the feeling was in his heart, and he ran up to the stately animal without a fear. Duke put back his ears and swished his tail as if displeased for a moment, but Ben looked straight in his eyes, gave a scientific stroke to the iron-gray nose, and uttered a chirrup which made the ears prick up as if recognizing a familiar sound. He'll nip you if you go bothering that way. Leave him alone and attend to the cattle as his honor told you," commanded Pat, who made a great show of respect toward Duke in public and kicked him brutally in private. "I ain't afraid. You won't hurt me, will you, old feller? See there now, he knows I'm a friend and takes to me right off," said Ben, with an arm round Duke's neck and his own cheek confidingly laid against the animal's, for the intelligent eyes spoke to him as plainly as the little whinny, which he understood and accepted as a welcome. The squire saw it all from the open window, and suspecting from Pat's face that the trouble was brewing, called out, "Let the lad harness Duke if he can. I'm going out directly, and he may as well try that as anything." Ben was delighted and proved himself so brisk and handy with the roomy chase, stood at the door in a surprisingly short time, with a smiling little ostler at Duke's head when the squire came out. His affection for the horse pleased the old gentleman, and his neat way of harnessing suited as well, but Ben got no praise except a nod and a brief, "All right, boy," as the equipage went creaking and jogging away. 4 sleek cows filed out of the barnyard when Pat opened the gate, and Ben drove them down the road to a distant pasture where the early grass awaited their eager cropping. By the school they went, and the boy looked pityingly at the black, brown, and yellow heads bobbing past the windows as a class went up to recite, for it seemed a hard thing to the liberty-loving lad to be shut up there so many hours on a morning like that. But a little breeze that was playing truant round the steps did Ben a service without knowing it, for a sudden puff blew a torn leaf to his feet, and seeing a picture, he took it up. It evidently had fallen from some ill-used history, for the picture showed some queer ships at anchor, some oddly dressed men just landing, and a crowd of Indians dancing about on the shore. Ben spelt out all he could about these interesting personages, but could not discover what it meant because ink evidently had deluged the page, to the new reader's great disappointment. "I'll ask the girls. Maybe they will know," said Ben to himself, as after looking vainly for more stray leaves, he trudged on, enjoying the bobolink song, the warm sunshine, and a comfortable sense of friendliness and safety, which soon set him to whistling as gaily as any blackbird in the meadow. Chapter 6. A Circulating Library. After supper that night, Bab and Betty sat in the old porch playing with Josephus and Belinda and discussing the events of the day, for the appearance of the strange boy and his dog had been a most exciting occurrence in their quiet lives. They had seen nothing of him since morning, as he took his meals at the squire's and was at work with Pat in a distant field when the children passed. Sancho had stuck closely to his master, evidently rather bewildered by the new order of things, and bound to see that no harm happened to Ben. "I wish they'd come. It's sundown, and I heard the cows mooing, so I know they have gone home," said Betty impatiently, for she regarded the newcomer in the light of an entertaining book and wished to read on as fast as possible. "I'm going to learn the signs he makes when he wants Sancho to dance. Then we can have fun with him whenever we like. He's the dearest dog I ever saw," answered Bab, who was fonder of animals than her sister. Ma said, "Ow, what's that?" cried Betty with a start as something bumped against the gate outside. And in a moment, Ben's head peeped over the top as he swung himself up to the iron arch, in the middle of which was the empty lantern frame. "Please to locate, gentlemen, please to locate. The performance is about to begin with the great Flying Cupid act, in which Master Bloomsbury has appeared before the crowned heads of Europe, pronounced by all beholders the most remarkable youthful prodigy a-goin'. Hooray, here we are." Having rattled off the familiar speech in Mr. Smithers' elegant manner, Ben began to cut up such capers that even a party of dignified hens, going down the avenue to bed, paused to look on with clucks of astonishment, evidently fancying that salt had set him to fluttering and tumbling as it did them. Never had the old gate beheld such antics, though it had seen gay doings in its time, for of all the boys who had climbed over it, not one had ever stood on his head upon each of the big balls which ornamented the posts, hung by his heels from the arch, gone round and round like a wheel with the bar for an axis, played a tattoo with his toes while holding on by his chin, walked about the wall on his hands, or closed the entertainment by festooning himself in an airy posture over the side of the lantern frame, and kissing his hand to the audience as a well-bred Cupid is supposed to do on making his bow. The little girls clapped and stamped enthusiastically, while Sancho, who had been calmly surveying the show, barked his approval as he leaped up to snap at Ben's feet. "Come down and tell what you did up at the squire's. Was he cross? Did you have to work hard? Do you like it?" asked Bab when the noise had subsided. "It's cooler up here," answered Ben, composing himself in the frame and fanning his hot face with the green spray broken from the tall bushes rustling odorously all about him. I did all sorts of jobs. The old gentleman wasn't cross. He gave me a dime, and I like him first rate. But I just hate carrots. He swears at a feller and fired a stick of wood at me. Guess I'll pay him off when I get a chance. Fumbling in his pocket to show the bright dime, he found the torn page and remembered the thirst for information which had seized him in the morning. Look here, tell me about this, will you? What are these chaps up to? The ink has spoiled all but the picture and this bit of reading. I want to know what it means. Take it to him, Sanch. The dog caught the leaf as it fluttered to the ground, and carrying it carefully in his mouth, deposited it at the feet of the little girls, seating himself before them with an air of deep interest. Bab and Betty picked it up and read it aloud in unison, while Ben leaned from his perch to listen and learn. When day dawned, land was visible. A pleasant land it was. There were gay flowers and tall trees with leaves and fruit such as they had never seen before. On the shore were unclad copper-colored men, gazing with wonder at the Spanish ships. They took them for great birds, the white sails for their wings, and the Spaniards for superior beings brought down from heaven on their backs. Why, that's Columbus finding San Salvador. Don't you know about him? Demanded Bab, as if she were one of the superior beings and intimately acquainted with the immortal Christopher. No, I don't. Who was he, anyway? I suppose that's him paddling ahead, but which of the engines is Sam Salvador? Asked Ben, rather ashamed of his ignorance, but bent on finding out now he had begun. My gracious, 12 years old and not know your quackin' boss? Laughed Bab, much amused, but rather to find that she could teach the whirligig boy something, for she considered him a remarkable creature. I don't care a bit for your quacking boss, whoever he is. Tell about this fine feller with the ships. I like him, persisted Ben. So Bab, with frequent interruptions and hints from Betty, told the wonderful tale in a simple way, which made it easy to understand, for she liked history, and had a lively tongue of her own. I'd like to read some more. Would my 10 cents buy a book? Asked Ben, anxious to learn a little since Bab laughed at him. No, indeed. I'll lend you mine when I'm not using it and tell you all about it, promised Bab, forgetting that she did not know all about it herself yet. I don't have any time, only evenings, and then maybe you'll want it, began Ben, in whom the inky page had aroused a strong curiosity. I do get my history in the evening, but you could have it mornings before school. I shall have to go off early, so there won't be any chance. Yes, there will. I'll tell you how to do it. Let me read while I drive up the cows. Squire likes 'em to eat slow along the road so's to keep the grass short and save mowing. Pat said so, and I could do history instead of loafing around, cried Ben, full of this bright idea. How will I get my book back in time to recite? Asked Bab prudently. Oh, I'll leave it on the windowsill or put it inside the door as I go back. I'll be real careful, and just as soon as I earn enough, I'll buy you a new one and take the old one. Will you? Yes, but I'll tell you a nicer way to do. Don't put the book on the window, 'cause teacher will see you, or inside the door, 'cause someone may steal it. You put it in my cubby house, right at the corner of the wall nearest the big maple. You'll find a cunning place between the roots that stick up under the flat stone. That's my closet, and I keep things there. It's the best cubby of all, and we take turns to have it. I'll find it, and that'll be a first-rate place, said Ben, much gratified. Excuse me. I could put my reading book in sometimes if you'd like it. There's lots of pretty stories in it and pictures, proposed Betty rather timidly, for she wanted to share in the benevolent project, but had little to offer, not being as good a scholar as bright Bab. I'd like arithmetic better. I read tip-top, but I ain't much on arithmetic, so if you can spare yours, I might take a look at it. Now I'm a-going to earn wages. I ought to know about adding 'em up and so on, said Ben, with the air of a Vanderbilt oppressed with the care of millions. I'll teach you that. Betty doesn't know much about sums, but she spells splendidly and is always at the head of her class. Teacher is real proud of her 'cause she never misses and spells hard, fussy words like chirography and bronchitis as easy as anything. Bab quite beamed with sisterly pride, and Betty smoothed down her apron with modest satisfaction, for Bab seldom praised her, and she liked it very much. I never went to school, so that's the reason I ain't smart. I can write, though, better than some of the boys up at the school. I saw lots of names on the shed door. See here now, and scrambling down, Ben pulled out a cherished bit of chalk and flourished off 10 letters of the alphabet, one on each of the dark stone slabs that paved the walk. Those are beautiful. I can't make such curly ones. Who taught you to do it? Asked Bab as she and Betty walked up and down, admiring them. Horse blankets, answered Ben soberly. What? Cried both girls, stopping to stare. Our horses all had their names on their blankets, and I used to copy 'em. The wagons had signs, and I learned to read that way after Father taught me my letters off the red and yellow posters. First word I knew was lion, 'cause I was always going to see old Jubal in his cage. Father was real proud when I read it right off. I can draw one, too." Ben proceeded to depict an animal intended to represent his lost friend, but Jubal would not have recognized his portrait, since it looked much more like Sancho than the king of the forest. The children admired it immensely, however, and Ben gave them a lesson in natural history, which was so interesting that it kept them busy and happy till bedtime. For the boy described what he had seen in such lively language and illustrated in such a droll way, it was no wonder they were charmed. We'll stop there and start next time with Chapter 7. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.